Nitro Rad. I'll release this.
About 2.5 years after the release of SIREN on PS2 came a sequel, Forbidden Siren 2. Unlike the first game, it was never released in North America, only PAL regions in Japan, and as of such, it was never titled just Siren 2, it was given its full title, Forbidden Siren 2. Since Siren was only just called Siren in North America, and since this game never came out in North America, I'll be calling it by its full title, Forbidden Siren, this time around. Once again, in the director's chair is Keiichiro Toyama. In an interview, Toyama stated that the first game was created as a standalone work. As a result, they wanted to toss in every idea they had without holding back, because of which they ended up with a lot of experimental material, so when they finished the game, there was still plenty of ideas left over. This sparked desire to develop a sequel using these leftover ideas. After the first game didn't really sell too well, Toyama was told that it might have sold better if the game were easier. Toyama said that the high difficulty and confusing nature of the first game was something he planned all along. He didn't want it to be a game that you could just simply complete by playing it normally. He wanted information regarding progressing through the game to be spread online, being a collective effort to try and solve the game. Man, you know what that really reminds me of? PT. That game was so cool when it first came out. Everybody on the internet came together to try and figure this thing out. Though I guess PT kind of worked a lot better because it was an hour-long, completely free demo instead of a full-priced retail game. Come to think of it, Toyama and Kojima are currently both at Sony. Get them boys together, make them collaborate. I want to see them make something together. That would be sick. Unfortunately, this kind of ambitious design alienated much of the player base, including many fans of survival horror games. Being completely aware of how a game's confusing structure impacted its reputation is something very good to keep in mind when developing a sequel. And with that said, I am very interested in seeing how they handled Forbidden Siren 2, so let's dig in. I bought a PAL region PlayStation 2 console for this review since the PlayStation 2 has region locking. I know that I could have used a swap magic amongst other methods of playing the game, but I kinda like the novelty of a different physical console. PAL games have really weird outputs. It runs at 25 frames per second instead of 30. It took me a little while to get used to, so if the gameplay seems choppier than normal in this video, that's the reason. The game starts with a flashback to 29 years ago. A young boy named Shu is going to sleep, but he then wakes up in the middle of the night to find his father murdered, with a strange man standing in the doorway. Little does he know, this strange man is him 29 years in the future. We then flash forward to 2005. Mamoru Itsuki, an editor for a magazine, has taken a ferry to a cursed island in hope of getting some writing material out of it. Also on the boat are a handful of other characters, including Shu, the boy from 29 years ago. He's now an adult and he's returning to the island to recover his lost memories. Then a giant tidal wave comes out of nowhere, destroying the boat and strands everybody on the island. I guess shit happens. We then take control of Mamoru in what serves as a tutorial mission. It really babies you through it this time, carefully explaining every aspect of the controls very carefully. It even scolds you when you go where the game doesn't want you to. Like, come on, man, I just wanted to look around. Okay, fine, I'll go up the stairs. Jeez. I understand that they're going into this one knowing that people thought the first game was too hard, but this is not the way to do it. The game was hard because the puzzles were too hard to figure out and the overall game structure, not because the gameplay itself. There are some cool additions though, like being able to break the window in a door, reaching through to unlock it. You can also crouch walk at a reasonable speed this time, a notable upgrade that I'm extremely thankful for. Sneaking around is much less cumbersome with the increased speed. You can play the game in first first-person mode now, which is pretty handy if you want a closer look at your surroundings when walking around. Also, while in sight-jacking mode, pressing the L1 button will enter the sight of whichever enemy is closest. If you get seen by somebody, R1 will enter the sight of whoever is chasing you, both of which are pretty dang helpful. Luckily, it's only the beginning of the game that's very tutorial heavy. Once you're done the first mission, it's pretty smooth sailing from there. After Mamoru stage, you'll take control of Yorito Nagai, a soldier who landed on the island with his squad. The only two surviving members are himself, Yorito, and his commander, Takaaki Misawa. This stage is all about guns. It'll demonstrate how to use them and how enemies this time can potentially pack a lot more heat than before. Unlike Siren 1, where firearms only consisted of revolvers and single-shot rifles, Forbidden Siren 2 sports assault rifles, which you can use to make short work of any unlikely Shibito blocking your path. At first, I thought this was kinda dumb, giving you such a powerful weapon in a survival horror game, but I was quick to realize you'll only ever get one if you're playing as Yorito or Misawa. You get the occasional stage to feel like a badass, obliterating anything in your path as you move along. However, it gets pretty challenging quickly, as the Shibito can also be armed with assault rifles, making them extremely difficult to get by if you don't have the right equipment or you're not clever with your strategy, though the game is now a lot more forgiving with just how many bullets you can take. This game has multiple difficulties, unlike the original Siren. I played on normal, so I imagine hard mode plays closer to Siren 1 in regard to how much damage you can take. The game has 9 total playable characters, 6 more in addition to Mamoru, Yorito, and Misawa. Firstly, there's Shigeru Fujita, a police officer native to the island. There's also Ichigo Yagura, a young schoolgirl lost on the island, Soji Abe, a young punk who was framed for murder and fled to the island in hiding, with the also playable Akiko Kiyota, who turns out to be psychic. There's also Ikuko Kifune, a marine biologist. And finally, there's the before-mentioned Shu Mikami. Unlike Siren 1, where all of the characters for the most part played the same way, some of the characters in this game have unique abilities or gimmicks that'll change the gameplay. Akiko is psychic and can see visions from the past. Using sight jacking, you can see the perspective of somebody from 29 years ago. This is used to solve various puzzles. For example, one has you figuring out that a key is in an old toy robot, or seeing somebody from 29 years ago type in a code to a padlock, allowing you to use that very same combination to open the door. Soji Abe can lay down hunting traps, stopping enemies in place. This will give you an opportunity to either run around them or take them out while they're helpless. Yorito and Misawa can use flare candles in addition to having assault weapons, and Ukiko has some sort of psychic power, allowing her to briefly take over the body of anybody she sight jacks. This means you can temporarily control any Shibito on the map, getting them far enough out of the way so you can get by unseen, or even using them to take out another Shibito. Unfortunately, her power really takes the wind out of her, causing you to lose your breath and walk extremely slowly after using it too long, so use this one with caution. I think the most interesting gimmick belongs to Shu Mikami. Just like Miyako from the first game, he is blind. This means he relies on sight jacking others to see, and as such, he keeps a seeing eye dog with him at all times. Gameplay as him is really interesting. Normal play is in first person, with everything being extremely blurry. Pressing R3 while sight jacking into somebody will allow you to control yourself. Using this, you'll sight jack into your dog and navigate the course using its perspective. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty dang cool. There's gonna be times when you'll have to instruct the dog to stand in a corner, giving you a wide enough viewing angle to see whether or not a Shibito is looking your way. Obviously, it can be a tad clunky at times since you have to rely on the dog's AI for a decent camera angle, but I am really glad they did try something more with the concept of a blind character. There will be times when you'll play as Soji having to escort Shu. Just like the first game, you'll have to look in his direction for him to see, but I feel he does a much better job at keeping up than Miyako did thanks to the better level design. The game structure is widely similar to that of Siren 1, even using the exact same link navigator as the level select. This time there's no looping though, you'll have the mission select from the very beginning of the game. Many of the levels once again have secondary missions that'll unlock a new stage when completed. This time they're a completely separate option than Mission 1, meaning you won't accidentally do Mission 1 again while going for Mission 2. In fact, you won't even have the option to do Mission 2 if any prerequisites from earlier stages haven't been met yet. Instead, it'll highlight the stage on the Link Navigator that something needs to be done in. What's more, the map screen even gives you a hint as to what it is you have to do, and this is always there, even the very first time you play the stage. It even gets checked off, graying it out once you've completed it. And not only that, but every stage in the game starts with a screen that gives you a couple of very helpful hints for completing the stage. Wow, they actually fixed everything I hated about the first game. I very rarely found myself looking at a walkthrough. I was actually able to figure out most things completely by myself. And it felt satisfying not having to look at the computer screen every 2 seconds to figure out what to do. I never felt lost or found myself running around at any dead ends either. This is a pleasant surprise. Everything about this game feels vastly improved from the first, not just in how it plays, but in the entire game structure. I had a much smoother, much more enjoyable experience playing Forbidden Siren 2 than I did Siren 1. I do think I like the story from the first game better though. I couldn't help but to feel many of the characters weren't quite as enjoyable this time around. I did get a good kick out of Soji though. He's like the lovable idiot who's really goofy all the time.
Can't end like this!
But the main character, Mamoru, he's a lame magazine editor that comes off as a pretty big idiot sometimes. Early on in the story, he meets up with a lost woman and agrees to help her get away from the people chasing her. At one point, even help her open the gates to the underworld, because that's a great idea. What could possibly go wrong with that? It's not like he didn't even know what he was doing. The mission says, open gates to underworld. Mamoru, what are you doing? And I never even noticed until way later in the game, but she was able to coax him into doing these ridiculous things because she's a siren. You know, from the... yeah. This is the inciting moment of the game where both the plot and the gameplay take a drastic turn. Once the underworld is open, an entirely new kind of demon, the Yamibido, enter the fray. I said Siren could have used scarier enemies, and Christ, did I ever get my wish. These guys are way freakier than the Shibido were. I mean, they were just kind of gray people with blood on their face, but there's something more about the Yamibido that makes me really uncomfortable. I think it's the proportions in their face. Their heads are slightly too big for their bodies. Nothing about them looks right. And the sound of violent shuffling they make as they run towards you makes me panic like nothing else. But it looks like they definitely try to use that facial capture technology more prominently this time. The faces on the Yamibido reek the uncanny valley even more than usual, but I noticed there's a lot more scenes of characters making exaggerated facial expressions, opening their mouths wide, showing their teeth. It's these kinds of wilder expressions that I didn't see in Siren 1 that really illustrate how unsophisticated this capture technology is. Seeing Soji's mouth stretch around his chin radiates that uncanny valley vibe, even more so than the first game. I'm glad to see them really go wild with it this time around, even doing things
Please, look at me.
Read it.
Okay, I don't know what it is about faces being bigger than they should be or being in places that they shouldn't be, but I find this kind of thing really scary. Like, just personally to me. I don't know why, but, like, I'm still shaken up about that giant head in Silent Hill 4 the room, but, like, when they try to do things like this... I just had to suggest the first game have scarier enemies, now didn't I? Like, I wanted scarier enemies, I got my wish. Like, God, I hate these things. They're scary, dude. What else can I say? I see them, I get scared. I don't want to be near them, I don't want to be in the same room as them. I get uneasy when I realize beating the level means going near one. To its merit, Forbidden Siren 2 really went above and beyond with its enemy designs, incorporating a creative amount of body horror, something the first game didn't quite achieve. Though, while it may have scarier enemies, I did feel that the atmosphere and the sound design weren't quite as up to snuff as the first game. It was rarer that I felt that unease just from my surroundings rather than the enemies I had to deal with. I'd say that Siren 1 is more consistently scary, but when Forbidden Siren 2 is scary, it's way scarier than Siren 1, if that makes any sense. The scares are more powerful, just not as frequent or ongoing. But there's one major thing that really stuck out to me, and that is the English voice acting. Instead of having British accents from the European localization, everyone in the game has really thick Japanese accents, as if they just got the Japanese actors to say all their lines again in English.
The sun's about to set.
I completely misunderstood.
It's even hard to understand at times. Thank God the game has subtitles. Better yet, this one actually has an option for the original Japanese audio with the subtitles, which I'd recommend over the English any day.
Ah, that's it. It was on TV!
But, like I said about Siren 1, it is a very Japanese game with Japanese settings, characters, and folklore, so the Japanese accents do make more sense, but even if that was an artistic decision rather than a budget decision, it still makes the sacrifice of not being very well delivered. The story is still very interesting though. It's fairly different from the original Siren, but is again told in the same Tarantino-style non-linear way. This time the curse lands everybody in an alternate reality where the events from 29 years ago are currently occurring on the island. This is how Shu was able to see his younger self. The story follows everyone's efforts to stop the curse and escape. The characters cross paths a lot more often than they did in Siren 1. Much of the game's plot revolves around this radio tower at one point, and you can see it in the distance from many of the stages. Do you remember the first time you played Ocarina of Time and you saw Death Mountain in the background and you really wanted to go there because it stood out from everything else, that glowing ring around the mountain? That's how I felt every time I saw that radio tower in Siren. I was wondering what that thing was the whole game, but I knew it must have been really important. It really motivated me to keep playing. A really nice touch, this one right here. Instead of having multiple missions all lead to a default ending and the true ending being unlocked by completing every mission, the missions will eventually land into two general paths, each with their own ending. One focusing on Mamoru, a happy, nice ending, and one focusing on Yorito, where he spends the rest of his life fighting the Yamibito and in endless hell. From my understanding, both of these endings are canon. They coexist at the same time, with Mamoru and Ikuko landing back in the real world and Yorito not being as fortunate. Some characters have a happy ending, some don't. It really sucks that this dumbass gets out okay, but the one who put in the extra mile is the one trapped in hell forever. There's also a hidden ending where Soji too makes it out into reality, but in the process he ended up changing the past so he was never framed for murder. This way he can once again lead a regular life. In my opinion, Soji was easily the most likable character, so I'm really glad they included a happy ending for him too. And that's it. That is wait, what's this? Down at the bottom right, there's one more mission. Kiyoya Suda? Holy shit, hell yeah, dude! After beating the game, you unlock a bonus mission where you get to kick some ass as Kiyoya Suda, who's still sporting that katana and that super relic weapon thing. It's a sick bonus stage. Awesome to see Kiyoya back in action. From what I've heard, there's more mini-games you can unlock, including one where you play as a Shibito, but you have to 100% the game on hard mode for it, which I unfortunately didn't have the time to do. But yeah, that is Forbidden Siren 2. It fixes pretty much every problem I had with the first game, while also incorporating a lot of new things that keep it fresh. If you had to pick between one or the other, this is clearly the better game here. It is a much smoother ride than the first game. But I don't know, part of me still kinda likes the first game better. Maybe it was the characters, maybe it was the story, maybe the level design and atmosphere, but I easily had a much more enjoyable experience playing Forbidden Siren 2. Unfortunately, the only legitimate way to play this game is to import a copy, and since PlayStation 2 is region locked, you're gonna have to go the extra mile to play it. They have the first game up on PS4, do the same with this, throw it up on PSN. It's a strong sequel, and I definitely think more people should be able to play it. With the Siren duology out of the way, there's still one more game left to talk about. A remake of sorts, a reimagining of the first game, and on PlayStation 3 no less. I see people talk about that one a lot more than these two, so stay tuned next time when we tackle Siren Blood Curse for PlayStation 3. Stay tuned. One focusing on Yorito, where he spends the rest of his life fighting the Yamada... where he spends the rest of his life fighting the Yabadabadoo.